This 911 Strong podcast is brought to you by our partners at the Police Credit Union of California.
As a financial institution founded by law enforcement for law enforcement and their families over 65 years ago, they have the experience and understanding to help you with all your financial needs,
including exclusive products designed specifically for law enforcement professionals. To become a member today, visit thepolicecu.org. That's the police, the letter C, and the letter U.org.
Or call 800-222-1391 and tell them you heard about them from the 911 Strong podcast.
Station to all units.
Prepare to copy.
You're listening to the 911 Strong podcast.
Don't act like I never told you.
With Aram and Kristen, bringing you stimulating discussion.
No, I like the sound of that.
An entertaining conversation.
And now, here's Kristen and Aram.
Hey friends, welcome back to the 911 Strong podcast. My name is Aram Choe, and with me as always is America's favorite dispatcher Kristen. Today our guest is a dynamic police officer from Southern California who didn't always want to be a cop. As a matter of fact, he had a disdain for police officers. We're going to find out today what makes him tick and what made him finally join our side. Today our guest is Ryan Tillman. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, Ryan.
What's going on, Aram? How you doing, Kristen? So good seeing you guys. It's an honor to be on today.
It's an honor to have you. It's been a long time coming. You and I have known each other for a long time. We were both coming up together on social media and evolving and doing this thing, and you just skyrocketed, man. You are in the stratosphere right now. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, brother. This has definitely been a long time coming, man. And I've always been an admirer of yours. And so you've done phenomenal work, man. It's like I said, it's a true, absolute honor to be in the presence of greatness this morning.
You're too much. That's how we feel about you, man. There might be some people out there, hard to believe, but there might be some people out there who don't know who Ryan Tillman is. And just briefly, you might have seen his videos. He has a popular podcast called the It's Needed Podcast, hashtag It's Needed Podcast. But on social media, he's known as Breaking Barriers United. Breaking Barriers United is an organization that he founded, he's a CEO of, that is attempting to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the communities. And before we get into how that started, let's find out how Ryan Tillman got started. I mean, where'd you grow up, and tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up here in Southern California in this city called Rialto, California. So shout out to the toe. So I'm an IE boy, man, born and raised 909 all day. And so growing up there, it was very, very interesting simply because I had two very, very good parents. My mom and dad did a phenomenal job raising me and my two siblings. But I grew up in a neighborhood where a lot of my friends didn't have dads in their lives. I grew up in a neighborhood where a lot of people were getting involved in crimes. I remember I think it was my sophomore year of high school, where about 4 or 5 of the guys on my team were convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to prison. They were tried as adults and sentenced to prison. I remember my freshman year of football, we had a guy on our team that had a beeper on his ankle because he was on probation. And then I remember going into my senior year, one of my friends was murdered in front of his driveway. And so, I definitely grew up in a neighborhood that had a lot of adversity, but I think that's what kind of actually helped shape me into the man I am today and being able to kind of become all things to all people. And so, Rialto was a great place to live and grow up, man. I'm so thankful for my parents, but it also, because of the hardships in Rialto, made me more of a well-rounded individual.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about school and stuff? Were you kind of always this charismatic guy in school? Were you popular?
I laugh because, yes. So the short answer to that is yes. All the people that know me, I was the president of my ASB class. I was the starting quarterback of our football team. I was starting at quarterback at my sophomore year of high school, so I was always an athlete. And, I'm just like my dad. I'm a split image of my dad who passed away last year. And, I'm a split image of him. And, my dad knew everybody in the neighborhood. And so as a young boy, I just always looked up to him. Everywhere we went, I just was like – and it's weird too because, I remember growing up, I remember saying, I'm never going to be like my dad. Because my dad – the one thing I'm not like my dad – is my dad didn't have any style at all. He was the guy that bought the Costco jeans. No disrespect to anybody listening to this, but he was the guy that bought the Costco jeans, the Costco shoes, whatever it may be. And he was the guy that was trying to shop at Big Five for my football cleats. And I'm like, Pops, like, that just ain't it. So, like, when it comes to fashion, completely different from my dad. But when it comes to personality, just like him. And so now, I'll be 36 tomorrow. And looking back, I'm like, man, I'm like a split image of my dad. Actually, my mom and my sisters called me Earl Tillman Jr. because my dad's name was Earl Tillman. And so my middle name is Earl, but they say, you're just like your dad. So they called me Earl Tillman Jr. And so yeah, it was a very, very, I was a very, very charismatic guy growing up, and that was largely, to give credit to my dad.
That's awesome. I admire the fact that you're paying homage to your father, and sorry for your loss. I know what it's like to lose my dad early too, and but having that kind of charisma and bringing an audience towards you, that was sort of something that you were used to growing up. And was that sort of a natural transition for you once social media came out? Did you decide that this is something you wanted to do, or did you resist it at first?
Yeah, man. So when I got into law enforcement, so keep in mind, like I didn't want to be a police officer. So growing up, I should have actually mentioned that. Growing up, I wasn't really a fan of police, just because, every time I had an interaction with a police officer growing up, I always felt like they were just trying to pick on me, or they were trying to pick on my family members. And I just felt like they had this certain arrogance to them that made them feel like they were above the law. And so it just really just didn't make me like police. I always used to say, like, police officers are guys that got picked on in high school, so they became police officers so they could pick on everybody else. Like that was a real thing for me. So when I got into law enforcement, I didn't know what I was entering into. I didn't know anything about the profession. I was a college athlete. I went on to college to play football at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So I came out, in my mind, I'm like, man, like, all right, cool. Like, God, if this is what you want me to do, show me what it is that you want me to do. So I get into law enforcement, and I've always been this charismatic guy, outgoing, love to talk to everybody. And, and during my hiring process, like, that's what the background investigators said they loved about me. Like, I can talk to people. So then when I got hired, like I wasn't used to this paramilitary thing. I didn't understand it. And so like the very thing that they hired me for was the very thing that they tried to suppress the moment I got hired. I was told that I was too jovial. I was told that I was too nice to be a police officer. And these are guys telling me this that had no idea where I grew up. I was one of those guys that was nice, but I also knew how to handle myself if I needed to handle myself. So those things, like early on in my career, they started to suppress me, try to suppress in me. And then when you throw the social media thing in the play, like social media for me was a natural thing because it was a way for me to kind of just connect with people and be that charismatic guy. And they tried to suppress that as well. And so it was very, very hard in the early years of being an officer and trying to be who I was without, compromising, my job and role as a police officer.
Yeah, I mean, we always say in law enforcement, we want to hire people that are representative of the community, people that the community can relate to. And how can they relate to someone that they want to suppress their personality? Nobody ever relates to a robot, right? So they hired you, like you said, they hired you because you've got this charismatic personality. You're a good communicator, which I think are some of the hallmark characteristics of leadership. And we want to exhibit leadership out in patrol, out in the community. Then we got to be free to be ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that is the case. I see it changing now. I don't know what you think, but at least at our agency, over the last couple of years, I've seen, kind of a loosening of the reins.
Yeah.
Me,
No, oh, sorry about that.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, interesting to know if you had a similar situation. I had previous administrations that tried to suppress my social media as it started getting. When I didn't have a following, they didn't care. But once I started getting some notoriety, it was they try to suppress it. But now, they let me show my badge, they let me show my patch. I'm recruiting on behalf of the department. I think they find those as an advantage. Do you have the similar situation?
Yeah, so two things. So one, I will say is definitely changing, no doubt about it. And I don't think it's just changed. Like my department has definitely changed as far as the personality stuff, but I think it's changing as a profession. I think a lot of the leaders are starting to realize that we're our own worst enemies. One of the number one problems in law enforcement right now is recruiting and retention. Well, the retention part of that we control. And so I'm like, if the one, yeah, we can talk about all these external factors as far as like, the people not liking police and stuff as being why people are leaving. But if you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, that's not why people are leaving. People are leaving because they feel like they're just a number. Like they feel like they're not cared about, they're mistreated. And so we're our own worst enemy. And I think people are recognizing that. So I think no doubt about it, I can see culture changing, which is a good thing. Now the second part of it, yes. So when I first got started on social media, well, I'll say this. I'll give this caveat. My command staff at Chino Police Department, which is where I work, has always been supportive of Ryan Tillman, no doubt about it. Like I cannot say, like if they were not supportive of me, then you guys wouldn't know who Ryan Tillman is. Like it's because of their support that the world knows who Ryan Tillman is because they allowed me to do the things that I'm doing. But a lot of my peers unfortunately weren't on that same page. A lot of my peers viewed it as, who's this guy trying to kiss up? Who's this guy? Like you have to realize, so I started Breaking Barriers United about a year and a half into my career. Now, if you guys have been in law enforcement for a long time, you guys know how it is. You got a young guy coming in here who wants to start this program to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community who doesn't, quote unquote, know his day job. That's what I was taking. And I get it. Like I said, now I get why the sentiment might have been that. But you have a lot of people that see that, and then they see this social media stuff, and they just weren't a fan of it. Like I remember there's a guy, I'm not going to name names, but there's a guy who, well, let me back up. So I used to do this thing called Soulful Sunday, and Soulful Sunday was a huge hit. Like it was Sundays, when I worked Sundays, it was my Friday. And so I would always be in my police car, and like I would hear like a old school song, and I would put it on, and I would just kind of like do some lip sync stuff, like just kind of back and forth. And it was a huge hit. Like people loved it, and the reason people loved it was because they saw the human behind that badge. So then I remember I went to a recruiting expo in Anaheim, and as I'm there, Billy Blank's son was there. I don't know if our audience knows who Billy Blanks was, but if that, I'm starting to date myself a little bit. But Billy, the Taco stuff. So his son was there doing some aerobic stuff with some of the people. So the Cuban Shuffle came on, and the Cuban Shuffle is one of those songs like, I don't care who's in the room, yo, grandma will get out of her seat and start dancing to the Cuban Shuffle. It's just one of those songs. So I'm in uniform. I hear the song come on. I was like, I don't care. Shoot, I'm about to go over there and get my groove on. So I start doing the Cupid Shuffle, and so I didn't realize people were recording. So they upload that to Instagram, and it kind of goes viral. Back then, viral was like, you had 10,000 views, and I was like, oh man, I made it. So that was going around. Everybody was nothing but good comments, and so I had a guy who was not a fan of mine. He's no longer with our department, but he was not a fan of mine at the time. And so he brings me into the locker room, or he calls me out of the field into the locker room, which was kind of weird in and of itself, but whatever. So he calls me out of the field into the locker room. I get there, and as he's getting dressed, weird number two, I'm like, why are you calling me in while you're getting dressed?
That's weird.
So he throws some paper down on the bench, and he was like, go ahead and pick that up and look at section G, subheading, whatever it was. What he threw down on the bench was the department policy. So I'm reading it. I'm a rookie guy reading this policy, and what I see is this item about social media. And at the time, I don't know if it was even labeled social media because social media wasn't really trending like that. And so he was like, hey, man, I'm just trying to look out for you and protect you, which in my mind, I'm like, no, you're not. You're just really just being a hater and just trying to suppress what I got going on. He's like, yeah, guys are chatting and this and that. And, I just want for your good, I just want you to kind of maybe just know that you could be violating policy, yada, yada, yada. So I remember I was getting things like that several times over and over again, and it was so frustrating. And then the last thing I'll share is I remember, again, I'm starting to blow up. Things are, people are starting to take notice. And then I get called into my lieutenant's office or I get a call, actually. I'm shopping with my family on a weekend, and I get a call by a lieutenant, or I get a text message saying, hey, give me a 1021 when you get a chance on my off time. So I call him, and he's like, hey, were you making some video? Matter of fact, it was the video that you and I shot together. The video that we went to the range together.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So I get a call based on that video. This lieutenant is no longer working there either. And he's like, hey, were you using department equipment to make your videos and stuff like that? Yada, 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 which at the time, some of those vests was a lot of my own equipment that I purchased on my own. but somebody had to say something. It was like, hey, he's using department equipment, whatever it was. So I kept getting this over and over again. And the last straw was, and this was, I thought was going to be the deal breaker from what my, social media career was, but it actually was the best thing that ever happened to me, was I got a call again into the commander's office. They were like, hey, people are saying that you were making posts in uniform with your badges and stuff, yada, yada, yada. You got to go through and you got to wipe everything that has a Chino Police Department badge on it. And bro, like at the time, like that like broke me, because I'm like, man, this is my identity type thing. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. So I called my video guy and I'm like, bro, this sucks. I was like, I don't know what our strategy is going to be. And looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to make a brand around Ryan Tillman rather than my badge. And so it was a blessing in complete total disguise, but it came on the heels of people hating. And so, the scripture says, and I'm a Bible believing guy, and scripture says, good things happen to those who trust in the Lord, and God could work all things out for those who love God. And that was like that scripture coming to life in my life, is saying like, hey, look, I can still work this thing out because you love me and you trust me. So I know I was a little long winded, but that's, I wanted to mention all that stuff to kind of share some context.
No, man, I think people are going to get a lot out of it, because if they're like me and they're listening, they can relate, because there's so many parallels. Even Kristen and I started our social media around the same time too, and we were doing the same things. Posting a uniform, because at the time you were absolutely right. The policy did not, social media was a new thing. Yeah. The policy didn't outline.
Well, I even blurred all of my stuff out because I just didn't want people to know where I was from at the time too. So, but yeah, we had the same thing, and we got several people are saying this, several people, and several people are sending me these pictures, and you got to take them all down. So we went through it, and I don't know. I won't go into too much detail, but the person who was saying several people sent it to them, we could see their profile picture and all of the photos, and it was only one person, So it's like, all right. And then, what, unfortunately, I guess not silver lining, but, after our guys passed, like, they allowed us to post about that and what we were going through. And so that showed our badges and patches and what city we were from, and they haven't given us a hard time since then. In fact, they kind of welcome it and repost some of our stuff too. So it's kind of turned around since then. But
that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. But when you're making change, people, there's always gonna be an uphill battle. And it's funny. I don't know if you saw today, but there was breaking news that it sounds like Live Golf and the PGA are actually going to partner up, or they're partnering up with one another. But the reason I bring that up is because when Live Golf came out, everybody was like, oh my goodness, these guys are leaving to do Live and this and that. But it's like, hey, sometimes it doesn't, don't go against the grain. Like, embrace the change that's coming, and Live is just different. So that's like the story for all of our lives on this podcast today.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I just heard a popular, I forget his name, but a real popular Real Madrid player left Real Madrid, the Premier League, to go play in Saudi Arabia in their league. They're putting up the money, so players are going. And you've seen the photos of what goes down in the Middle East. It's like the new playground for rich people.
Yeah. You can't. I mean, how can you be? I mean, you can't be mad. And I think it goes back to your identity. Like, people in law enforcement specifically there's a lot of people that suffer from identity crisis. I mean, this is the barometer to know if you're suffering from an identity crisis in law enforcement. If you don't get that promotion, if you don't get that special assignment, if you don't get certain things, if it affects your quality of life, then that means you're suffering from an identity crisis. And I'm not saying it's not normal, because I've been passed over multiple times. But what I'm saying is that, yeah, you work hard, you put everything into it, but when you start realizing that this is affecting who you are and who as a person, then that means you put all your identity into what you do, not who you are as a person. And so the moment I realized that, and I learned this lesson the hard way when my father-in-law passed away, and I was gone for a month, and when I got back, it was like business as normal. Like, they didn't, the show didn't stop because Ryan Tillman was gone. Like, it was, it continued as it should have. And so I always say, don't allow the badge to become your identity, because once that badge is taken away, I mean, you guys have probably seen far too often people that you least expected retire or get a medical retirement or get in trouble or whatever it is. And then once they lost that badge, they forgot who they were as a person. And so, I think, people that are listening to this, don't allow that badge to become so much of your identity that you lose who you are in the process.
Yeah, I tell this to young people all the time that the job is what you do. It's not who you are. If people ask you who you are, you're a son, you're a daughter, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a believer. And police work is what you do. So don't mistake being a police officer for who you are. Does it give you personal conviction? Absolutely. Do you have a mission while you're out there? Absolutely. But you as an individual are doing a profession, one of the most noble professions left in the world. And the other thing you touched on was when you were had about a year and a half on the job, you started doing this stuff, and people were giving you a hard time because they said you didn't have enough experience. Well, the last time I checked, time on wasn't a skill, right? Right? You can have experience, which is great, but what you do with that experience makes the difference. And what you did in that year and a half was so breakthrough at your agency and on social media. Only a handful of cops were doing this before, but you had the vision to carry what you did personally, how you were raised, and find a way to meld that with your profession and put that on a platform that gave you a broader audience. And in the end, and right now I know because your chief has given you the blessing to show your uniform and stuff, they see it. They see that this is working, that it's here to stay. I know one of your mentors is Gordon Graham, he from Lexipol. And I went to an old, back in the day, man, like 20 years ago, I went to a DUI, DRE school, and Gordon Graham came in as a guest lecturer. And one of the things, he's so great, such a great speaker, but one of the things he said back then was, if you're on social media, get off, because he's a risk management guy, right? He's an attorney. For those that don't know, Gordon Graham, if you look him up, was a former CHP sergeant, became an attorney, started Lexipol, which writes the policies for just about everybody. But he's a risk management guy too. He would travel to Japan, for instance, and learn about how their trains never have a derailment problem. They've never been in collisions because they build them on bridges or in tunnels. Whereas in America, we build them in the middle of roads, and we think that these barriers, these train barriers that come down, are going to stop accidents from happening. So he studies that. So he looked at social media and how negative it was because there were so many idiots out there doing stupid things on social media. He said, if you're an officer, get off social media, stay off social media. But look at how things change now. And another thing I tell people is, in addition to what you do with the time that you have, is roll with the changes. The most successful people in law enforcement, I've noticed two things. One, they have an incredible sense of humor. And number two, they've rolled with the changes. These people that say, I'm old school, I don't ever want to change, I'm whatever. I value tradition, but I also value that we evolve as a profession, we evolve as people, and we got to change with those times. And I think right now we're at really just scratching the surface with how agencies are going to use social media and their dynamic individuals within their department. I think now you're going to start seeing departments identify people like you, like me, like Kristen, and start promoting them. And I'm really glad that I've been doing this. You've been doing this a while, and we're in a position now where we can mentor other people. 'Cause I'm sure you get people that message you all the time. Hey, I finally got the green light. How should I do this? I don't want to mess up. And I'm glad that they have people like us, not just with the experience, but because time on isn't a skill, but people that have been there and been through the trenches that can give people advice on how to proceed the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're so spot on, Aram, man. It's like I always tell people, I always use the analogy, like when you watch the NFL draft, when they draft a person number one, they're not drafting him to put him on the bench. They're drafting him to play, and the reason they're drafting him to play is because they identified a certain skill set. So when you bring in these new people into your agencies, yes, I'm all about tradition and stuff like that, but at the same time, I also value skill set. And every time you make a hire, anytime you're making a new hire, you're hiring them because you've identified a certain skill set they have. Let them play. Like, put them in the game and let them play. That's how they're going to develop their experience. But that mentality of like, oh, man, you need to learn your day job first and stuff, like, there's a little bit of truth to that, no doubt about it. But let them play. Let them get their experience. Let them be who they are, because that's how they're going to continue to gain and harness that skill set that you hired them for in the process. And then the other thing that I was going to mention about, this whole social media thing and stuff is like, you're right. You, me, Kristen, and there's so many others of us out there, AJ, I can go on. We're forward thinkers. And so, like, because we're forward thinkers, we see things that others don't see. For example, like I've been saying for years, when it comes to recruiting, a lot of times we're so old fashioned in recruiting. I keep talking about the recruiting. We're so old fashioned. Billboards, go to college fairs, college expos, and there's no knock on it at all, but that's where we've been for years. And so I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a show on YouTube called Switch, where we switch the roles between law enforcement and the community, which has been a phenomenal series. Phenomenal.
I love it.
The engagement we've been getting has been outrageous. But the last few series, we've been advertising for police departments on there. And so what we're doing is we're basically said, hey, look, take the money that you would have put towards that billboard that's only going to last for 30 days and put it on social media where it will last forever. It's called evergreen content. It will last 3 years from now. I asked one of the departments that we advertise for, I said, in 3 years from now, will you have people coming into your department to apply saying that they saw a billboard 3 years ago? And the answer to that is no. And I said, why? Because you only paid for a 30-day spot on that billboard. If you advertise on YouTube, yeah, it may be fresh today, but in 3 years from now, it'll still be fresh. You'll have somebody watching that video and say, oh, wow, I wonder if they're still hiring. Let me go. So it's this concept of why not utilize the influencers in law enforcement to advertise for your organizations, to advertise, to bring people into the profession. And so, man, I've gotten multiple agencies say yes to it. I mean, we advertise for Rialto Police Department, we advertise for San Bernardino Police Department, and we already have others in the pipeline that are coming. And so it's just this new way of thinking about things and understanding where the next generation is getting their information from.
That's great to hear, man. That's so outside the box thinking. It's one thing to be creative enough to come up with content, but to have a business mindset also, because you got to think about sustainability. This stuff isn't free. The equipment, the time, the people involved. You got to figure out a way to fund this. And so I see so many parallels here, and this is why I got to take a quick break. And I know you know this business here, but we got to talk about our sponsor, ProForce. ProForce Law Enforcement is great. I know you purchase guns from there. You've been in there. I don't know if you've been in there lately, Ryan. Back in the day, you used to have to pull a number and wait 2 hours to get your gun, get looked at. But, man, they've streamlined the business so much. They've hired veterans, former law enforcement people to go in there that know guns. So it's not like you go into the Bass Pro Shop where you ask someone who knows about fishing rods about a gun. They can't tell you the difference between an automatic, a semi-automatic, and a revolver. But you go to ProForce, and they know more than we do, right? Unless you're Kristen's husband, Danny, who's a gun guru. But I want to go there, and I want to talk to the experts, and I want to know who's going to give me the best deal for my money. And ProForce is it, man. So for those of you guys listening out there, ProForce hates it too when we do an advertisement. They want it to be organic, but you brought up bringing up residual income and stuff like that, and I am proud to say, when we opened up our podcast to advertisers, we had a lot of people that wanted to come. One of them was the Simple Greens company. You hear them on a bunch of other podcasts. Yeah. And I'm like, when they actually came to us, they were, they offered us good money. I'm like, cool. When do we get our samples? Or no, we don't give samples. I'm like, you want me to read this script saying we've been doing this for so long and it's changed our life, and you're not willing to give us samples?
Yeah, negative.
Yeah, so I said no. And to our audience, I just want to let you know, I know Ryan's the same way. We believe that our product is next level, so we don't want to affiliate ourselves with brands that are not at the same level. So, our title sponsor, the Police Credit Union in California, they're a huge entity in law enforcement and the private banking space. And then ProForce, man, they're the most legit gun business out here in Southern California, and we're blessed to be affiliated with both. So going back to the agencies that you mentioned, Ryan, they're both huge agencies. For those listening across the country, both of those agencies that he mentioned are premier agencies. And I wouldn't have, man, you're so outside the box thinking, because I wouldn't have even thought of that. But what's given you your business acumen? Like, did you have businesses before, or was it something that just a hidden talent you didn't know you had that evolved?
Yeah, so I've been around entrepreneurship my whole life through my dad and a lot of other people, my cousins. But I went to college and got my degree in marketing. So that was my idea. Like when I graduated from college was, I'm gonna get out of college, I'm gonna go start a new Fortune 500 company. And that's it. Like, that was my mindset. And I tried many businesses and failed many times. I've actually lost people's money before, but that's story for a different day. But I always say I never failed. I actually just learned from my experience and just continued to grow. And so when I got out of college and God showed me like this is what He wanted me to do was law enforcement. I thought my dreams of being an entrepreneur were over, and it was quite the opposite. It was now I actually got to see what God wanted me to do as opposed to what Ryan wanted me to do. And so when I looked at it through that lens, that was the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey. And it was at a time when what's his name? Michael Brown had just got killed in Ferguson. And I'll never forget the feeling of like, man, like I hate the way it feels to be a cop. Like I hate this feeling right now. Like everybody hates me. I'm a black guy. And so people in my community are like, I'm a sellout. And then, others in law enforcement don't understand the dichotomy of the neighborhood and the culture. And so like it was just this in between place. And that's where my entrepreneurship kind of kicked in. And I said, you know what if I went out there and tried to change the face of modern day policing? So it's because of mentors like Gordon Graham who really poured and watered the seed that was already there that allowed it to sprout. And so when we talk about, thinking outside the box, I've always been an outside the box thinker. Like, how can we do things and streamline things? And now like I said, we're just barely now starting to see the fruits of our labor. This has been a 7 to 8 year journey. And there's been a lot of highs, but there's also been a lot of lows. But I always tell people it's all about consistent quality consistent over everything. If you want to win in anything, quality consistency. Like a lot of people have one, but they don't have the other. They'll have quality stuff, but they're not consistent. Or you'll have people that are very, very consistent, but they lack the quality. And so if the secret formula is quality consistency, and that's the only reason why people know what Breaking Barriers United is and what we do.
Yeah. Speaking of the fruits of our labor, I want to just throw this out there because the blue check mark thing is like,
bro.
You and I got ours legitimately through social media the right way.
Aram, you paid for it.
No, this was back in like October, November before you could even do that.
I remember when you came and told me you got it.
I was like, man, yes. Validated, right? Validated. And then, I get to enjoy it for 3-4 months before people can buy it now?
You're telling me, bro. I actually wanted to create a shirt that says, "Are you verified or are you verified?"
Yeah. Man, that was short-lived. But I remember that day, the first people I texted was Kristen and Danny, her husband, Tactical Churro, and my wife are in a group text, and I sent the screen. I was on my way to work, and, I admitting guilt here, but I glanced at my Instagram because I'm just cruising, right? And I'm like, what is this notification? You were verified. So I screenshot it, and I think I woke them up. I sent them the screenshot. I don't care. It was like at 4 a.m, but I'm like, yes, validated.
Bro, that was a huge win, bro. And you'll have those that say, oh, you shouldn't find validation in this and that, which is true. There's truth to that. Like,
Sure.
I shouldn't allow Instagram and that to make me feel validated. But it's a lot of hard work. I mean, there's the other coin, the other side of that. Like, people don't understand how difficult it is to put content out, how difficult it is to change and do these different things. And so when you get that validation, quote unquote, it does mean something because it's beyond. It means that people value your opinion and value what you have to say, and that takes work. And so it's not about the actual blue check. It's actually about that people actually recognize you and say, man, you are somebody that we value.
Yeah, I had a
well, at least that's what it was until you can start paying for it. But
well, and I think too, it's even harder for you guys to get it because you've been shadow banned and blackballed and all that just because of law enforcement and sharing what you guys share. So on top of just being hitting the numbers and views and likes and all the things, that's a whole other wall you guys had to overcome too.
The shadow ban was something else.
Yeah, that was a rough thing. But I figured out, like you said, sometimes when you get these negative things, they're hidden blessings. Because I figured out how to do it right eventually. I figured out that I need to be a professional, that Instagram takes their platform professionally. I need to too. I just can't throw stuff out there that's going to be causing controversy and stuff like that. Yes, our job is controversial, but if there's an educational component behind it, I think they recognize that. The algorithm's smarter than any of us. Some people are like, I can outwit the algorithm. We're talking about, AI stuff here right now. It's so advanced that we can't even fathom what's going on out there. So if we put stuff that's genuinely rewarding. There's a reward piece for the audience. There's an educational component. We throw it out there, and a lot of your videos are the same way. You throw the viral videos out there that show shocking police videos, but it's not like the other pages that are doing it for shock value. You do it because there's an educational component, because you narrate behind it, and you say, this is why it happened, and you don't take one side or the other. I love that about your videos.
Pretty neutral. Yeah.
Very neutral, because you talk about the perspectives of both sides. And I think that lends a lot to your credibility. And I just actually posted this in my story. Somebody asked, what are the 3 things that we look for in a recruit? And I said that was easy: character, competence, and credibility. And your character, nobody can doubt your character. You got a tremendous character. And competence, yeah, you've been on the job a dozen years now, and you've been doing the social media thing for 7 to 10 years. But the credibility, man, that's the thing that you can't buy that. You are who you are. You're transparent on social media, and anybody can call you out on BS that you did 5-6 years ago. But you're true to who you are, and that's credible to Ryan Tillman. And you can't buy that. No amount of blue check money or whatever that people are paying, you can't buy that. You can buy your $20 blue check, but you can't buy credibility. And I think that's what draws people to you. Real quick, I want to go back to your relationship with Gordon Graham. You guys are such two different people. I mean, just two different ends of the spectrum. How did that relationship come into fruition?
So it's funny. So you brought up the DUI class earlier. I was at the same DUI class when I first, again, young guy on the job, a rookie still, and our the department sent us out to go get the training. And he spoke, and when he spoke, he was very, I mean, you've seen him speak before. He's very captivating and what he had to say was very, very intriguing. And so, I'm this young guy sitting in the audience who has aspirations of changing things. And I'm looking at somebody who essentially did that for law enforcement in his era. So he says, hey, if you have any questions, come up to me at the end, whatever it may be. And I'll answer those questions. And so my dad always instilled in me at a young age, like, don't look at other people as being better than you just because of their position. We all wake up every single day and put on pants every single day, just like the other person. So don't ever look at somebody that's higher or lower than you in that way, and always feel like you can go and talk to anybody. So I took what my dad said, and I've always applied that. And I think that's opened up so many doors. And so that day I went up to at the end of the classroom. Or at the end of the class, I went up to Gordon and I introduced myself, told him what I was trying to do. And he said, hey, man, shoot me an email. I would love to chat with you more about this. And so I took him up on his offer. And that day I went home and I shot him an email and told him like what I wanted to do. And so he was like, hey, man, I would love to meet with you in person. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is crazy. Like Gordon Graham, like this, he's like the guru.
Yeah.
And so I'm like going back and forward with him. And he's like really quick, Johnny on the spot, emailing me back. He said, why don't you come to my house? So I like really, I'm like, wow, he wants me to come to his house. So I shared this with my lieutenant, or actually my sergeant at the time, who was testing for lieutenant. He's like, what? He wants you to come to his house? And so I was like, hey, would you come with me? He was like, yeah, I'll come with you. Like, of course he lives with me. So I went to Gordon's house, and man, like that was again over almost 10 years ago, and that was a start of our relationship. And ever since then, like we've had such a good relationship with one another that every time I'm doing something, I'll run it by him. And, and the cool thing about it is like, Gordon's always giving me advice, but I'm one of those guys that I'll always hear your advice. But if I feel strongly or convicted about something, I may do it otherwise. And so he's giving me advice that I've actually done the opposite of. But he's also, I think, respected me for that as well, is because, like I'm willing to make decisions on my own half. And so he's just such a good man, and his wife and his family, like they've let me into their personal space so much so that like I have a book coming out. My book will be coming out. Sorry about that. My book comes out in what the heck just happened? Hold on one second. You guys there? Let me see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because my wife is
you're looking all confused.
My book comes out at the end of this month or the beginning of next month, and I sent my book over to Gordon just so he can read it and take a look at it and see how things. So I really value his opinion a lot. And he said early on, he said, Ryan, like the people of my time, my generation, we're slowly passing. He said, so who's going to take up the torch? And I said, you know what, I would love to be one of those people that could try to fill the shoes of you and so many others that went before me.
That's awesome, man.
That's cool.
I think as unlikely a relationship as it was, it turned into something beautiful because You two are working great, phenomenally together, and that lends to your credibility again. You having a guy like Gordon, who's viewed in the industry as being one of the most credible people, backing you is a huge testament to who you are.
So what is your book about? You might as well plug it.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that. So it's called Happy Eyes, Becoming All Things to All People. I know you guys probably heard me mention that earlier on this podcast. One of my strengths has been my abilities to become all things to all people. And I think that's what's allowed me to be a decent officer and just a decent person, all around. I've had relationships with everybody on the spectrum, from being able to, Michael Strahan's a good friend of mine, all the way down to people that have been homeless or incarcerated. And the reason I've been able to effectively do that is because I've learned how to lead with love, empathy, and respect. And so I think in order to become all things to all people, you got to learn to lead with love, lead with empathy, lead with respect. And if you can do that, if you can put those three principles together, you will develop relationships that you never even imagined, and you'll also be able to win people over that you never even imagined. We live in a world where we're so divided, and people are always, so caught up on being on the far left or caught up on being on the far right, where we've lost track of how to communicate with one another. And so it's really a book on how to effectively be able to develop relationships with people that are completely different from you without compromising who you are. And I've never compromised who I am. I've never compromised my faith, but I still have relationships with people that are completely different from me. And that's only because I've been able to become all things to all people.
That's incredible.
That's awesome. Sounds like a good read. I'm sure it's going to do well.
I'll send it to you guys for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure, since by the time this comes out, your book will have been out, so they can probably pick it up on Amazon. Is that where you're going to start selling
Yeah, so
it?
it'll be on Amazon, and I still got to go over, I have to go over all the different avenues with my publisher where it's going to be. But yeah, Amazon for sure. And it's cool too. So you'll have Gordon's writing a dedication on it, of course.
Nice.
Dak Prescott actually wrote the foreword of the book. If you're not familiar with Dak Prescott, he's the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Super, super good guy. I work for his foundation. And then Michael Strahan is writing a dedication. So it's really, really cool to have people like that have bought it into me and willing to do that for me.
Heck yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You got a lot on your plate, man. How do you find? Because you got a wife and kids too, and you're a professional police officer. I mean, where does the time? Are you one of those guys that has like 48 hours in a day? What's going on?
So shout out to my department. I'll say this: shout out to my department. Good things come to those who love and serve God, and God will turn situations into your favor. And a lot of the same things that people dog me out for have actually turned around, and now I'm finding favor in it. And because of that, about a year and a half ago, my chief of police, Wes Simmons, phenomenal man, created a part-time position for me at my department. So I only work part-time now as a police officer. So I'm there maybe 1 or 2 times a month. And they still allow me to still don the badge for now, which is nice. And I say for now because I realize, if I'm being realistic, it's not a for everything. But they did that because about a year ago, like you said, I was burning the candle at both ends. I have a wife and 3 young children. I'm trying to run this business, but at the same time trying to be a police officer. And after praying about it, I asked God, what's my next move? And what was revealed to me is that He put me in a position with some influence to change the way people view law enforcement, but also to change law enforcement internally. And I can't do that. I couldn't do that in my current role as being a full-time police officer. I need to step out in faith and see what the Lord was going to do for me. And so I did it, and man, it has probably been the best decision I ever made in my life, when I just put God first. I'm able to travel around the country speaking at schools all over the place. I was speaking in schools in New Jersey a couple weeks ago. I'm making these shows switch. The last series we had was with Redman and DJ Envy from the Breakfast Club, and so it's just been a whirlwind, and I've just been along for the ride.
Man, you've been certainly blessed, and I do believe. I'm a believer as well. I knew that, but I do believe God puts people in positions for a reason, and God uses us as tools to fulfill His mission. And I think you're certainly out there, using this as a ministry of sorts, because I have heard you speak, and you're not shy about talking about your faith, and that's great because I think people see, well, if this man's a police officer and he's not that bad, police officers are great. same thing with Christianity. If this man's a believer, man, I never really gave God a second thought. Maybe God's doing something in this guy. He's moving in through Ryan. Maybe I need to give God a chance. And I think it's a good testimony what you got going there. You've got this ministry going that's paramount to what you're actually doing. And I know, when we put God first, amazing things happen, and it's evident through your life, man.
Well, thanks so much, Aram and Kristen. Like I said, it is definitely it's all His glory. It's not my glory.
Amen.
It's not Ryan Tillman. It's all God. And so I'm just the vehicle. I'm the vessel, just like you and Kristen are. We're just the vessels of it. And just we accomplish these things through obedience. And so there's whoever is listening to this today, if you're a first responder, you're whatever it is that you are, just put Him first, and everything else will work itself out. I mean, we're gonna face adversity. I'm going through. There's certain things in my life right now that are happening that, I didn't foresee that are happening, but I just have to trust and know that His plans and His ways are not my ways. His ways are higher than my ways, and so by doing that, it will always work out for His glory.
Amen. And talking about adversity, if the Lord could send me an answer about how to deal with these taxes.
Bro, I'm that guy that puts taxes to like the back burner as long as I can, because I don't want to do it, man.
Yeah.
So
No, making revenue on social media has been a blessing, but once a year you're reminded of the responsibility that comes with it too. Yeah,
bro, don't even remind me, man.
Yeah, you got a good accountant, let me know.
It's the responsibility of living in California is what it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'll tell you guys more about some stuff offline, but yes.
All right. Well, Ryan, we want to thank you for coming on to us. I know you're tremendously busy. I know the audience knows you're tremendously busy, but for you to take time out of your morning, drive out to your studio and meet with us, means a lot to us. And man, I wish we could do this all day long, but I know you got your.
We got to do part 2, and I got to have you guys on my podcast. So we'll switch, we'll flip flop. But yes, this has been awesome.
Absolutely, and when your book comes out too, we'll have you back on so you can talk a little bit more about your book. I want to copy that so we can read chapters together, and so our audience gets a little taste of what it is, and they can buy your book.
Absolutely, I'll send it over to you guys. So I'll get your address, or if we meet up in person, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I'll send it over.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, yeah, Kristen, you got anything? Before we wrap up the show?
Thanks for coming on. It's been a long time. So glad to see you and see you flourishing and taking off, and it's amazing. So thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you all. Appreciate you. Love you guys.
Yeah. Hey, Ryan, real quick, your podcast, the It's Needed podcast, it's playing on every platform. And do they have to actually put the hashtag in there?
I don't think so now. I think to this point, you can just type in "It's Needed," it'll come up. But yeah.
And it's on every platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Look that up. And on social media, you are Ryan Tillman, or Breaking Barriers United.
Correct. Go do the Breaking Barriers United, because I do have a personal account that I haven't been on. I think the last time I posted was like 3 years ago. So yeah, do Breaking Barriers United on all platforms.
Right, and it's Ryan because it'll have Ryan's face on it.
Yes, it will.
All right, brother. It's been a fun time with you, man. Like I said, I wish we could spend more time with you, but we'll definitely get together again on your podcast, and we'll get you back on ours when your book opens up.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys, and thank you guys for listening. We know you have your choice to listen to just about anybody, and thank you for inviting us into your homes, into your offices, and on your drives. And as always, we'll be as family-friendly as we can. So share us with your friends, share us with your family. Let them know that we're pretty much rated G. Sometimes we get to the PG-13, but we're safe for the family, and we want you to be there for us along the ride. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.